Good morning. I'm Stephanie Kane. I'm the U.S. Entertainment, Media, and Communications Assurance Leader for PwC. I've also been involved with the Outlook and this event for many, many years. So I am thrilled to see so many familiar faces return into this event and many new faces as well. I'm also thrilled to be the first to introduce you to this year's edition of the Entertainment and Media Global Outlook. We'd again like to welcome our friends at Turner who are in Atlanta this morning. We're broadcasting this event live to them in their NBA studios where 50 members of their team are watching. Similarly, I'd also like to welcome my colleagues, our clients, and the press who are watching this event as well via live stream from around the US and the globe. As a reminder, those of you here today, but certainly those of you who are watching us live, can tweet us questions throughout the day using the hashtag #PwCOutlook. We have a great program planned for you this morning. I'm going to kick it off with a few brief summary comments about our findings of the Outlook from this year's survey. And then I'm going to turn it over to my partners and our distinguished colleagues from HSN, from EA, from the Financial Times, and as well from Google. Sorry, apologies, as that left my brain for a minute there. So we're going to have a lot of great conversations this morning. We're going to talk through the Outlook trends. You'll hear that coming out throughout. And then we'll also talk about some of the general trends impacting our industry. So let me start with what the Outlook is, for those of you who may be new to us. Each year, throughout the year, we perform extensive research around consumer behavior, micro and macroeconomic trends, and other factors influencing our industry. We take that look across numerous countries and break down across the industry segments. We do this so annually we're able to update and present to you a 5-year historical look back and a 5-year forward-looking forecast of the industry revenues across entertainment and media. We analyze those revenue trends broken down into 2 mega sectors, advertising and consumer spend. We do that across 54 countries, the same level of data. And for those of you keeping count, yes, that's 4 more countries this year than we've ever had before. This year, we've added Egypt, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and Peru, based on interests in those fast-growing countries. Consistent with last year, we've broken down the data across 13 segments. Inclusive in those segments is internet access. And yes, we do acknowledge that's not necessarily a pure E&M market per se, but internet access is one of the leading indicators of where entertainment and media consumer spend will go, and it's also our fastest growing platform in terms of advertising. So important to set the benchmark with that analysis. Consistent with the past years, our extensive body of research is available online, and online only. In addition to the benefit of saving a few trees, the real benefit is actually to you as users. We are no longer limited by the number of printed pages in terms of the data that we can provide to you. Additionally, you now can slice and dice the data any way you like that allows you to look at the business the way you'd like. The data is available starting today, so please make sure you talk to your account teams and make sure your subscriptions are current. Okay, enough of the paid commercials. Let me get a little bit into our data here. Based on our research and our analysis, we've pulled out a couple of key themes from the data. And let me introduce those to you at the highest level now, but you'll certainly hear those coming out throughout the morning in our conversations. First, advertising is approaching a significant tipping point where internet advertising is poised to exceed all other forms of advertising. Digital advertising will represent almost 1/3 of all ad dollars spent by 2018. Internet advertising is growing at over 10% on average per year, and that's being driven by mobile internet advertising, which in and of itself is growing by over 20% per year as we look out over the forecast period. Clearly, dollars are following the eyeballs. And with growth rates like that, it's no surprise that the advertising industry looks and feels very different than it did only 5 years ago. But while digital advertising is going strong, there's still a challenge for an industry, but also a great opportunity in terms of monetizing the digital consumer. Consumers are embracing digital behaviors and digital content experiences. but consumer revenue from digital sources still lags. Throughout the remainder of the morning, I look forward to hearing more about different strategies to monetize that consumer from many of our guests who will be up here with us. Cutting across the geographies, there are 9 high-growth markets that are growing and driving global entertainment and media as we look out over the forecast period. Those start with our BRIC countries, for which we're familiar, but add to that Mexico, South Africa, Turkey, Argentina, and Indonesia. These are the markets to watch as collectively they are forecast to account for over 20% of our global entertainment and media spend by 2018. Additionally, 2018 is the year when China will overtake Japan as the second largest entertainment and media spending market, second only behind the US. So what's driving the growth in this market? Well, it's the growing middle class who are absolutely boosting their spend across entertainment and media products. But the similarities may just end there. So as well, with differing taste, differing pricing expectations, and differing delivery platforms in each one of these countries, it takes effort to figure out how to realize that consumer spend and that revenue spend. And I look forward to Marcel and Matthew talking to us a little bit later on about how we can do that around the globe. Let's stay on the geographies for just another minute more, and let's slice the data a bit differently than we've done in the past. This year, we've broadly taken our 54 markets and categorized them into 4 groups. We've taken these 4 groups spread across characteristics based on CAGR and market size. So we've divided it up on this chart between those countries with higher or lower growth compared to the average global 5% CAGR, and also with those markets that have lower or larger spend in comparison to the global market average. We believe that this cut is actually more relevant than what we've presented in the past in terms of pure regions, because if you look at it as a region as a whole, it's actually masking a fair amount of diversity. Let's start in the upper left quadrant with our mature markets. These 11 countries that make up the mature markets have significant market size in aggregate. They're nearly double the total of all the 3 other remaining quadrants combined. These markets will continue to dominate in terms of our spend, and thus they clearly cannot be ignored. However, with a growth rate of only 3.4% CAGR over the next 5 years, they clearly lag the market average across the globe. The next wave markets. We have 5 countries that we've characterized as next wave markets. These are the markets that are starting to gain importance, both individually as market size, but also poised to grow faster and more significantly than any of the other markets. With a growth rate nearly 3 times what we're seeing in the mature markets, in aggregate, these next wave markets will represent almost 20% of the entertainment and media spend by the time we reach 2018. The up-and-comer markets. In this group, we have 22 countries which are expected to exhibit significant growth rates, very similar to what we just talked about in terms of the next wave markets. However, they're smaller in scale. And as a result, the opportunities there may not be as imminent or as scalable as those in the next wave. But with a forecasted CAGR of almost 9%, they are certainly markets that can't be ignored. Finally, the lower left quadrant represents 16 markets where there's smaller scale and slower growth. As you're mostly familiar with, we do as well cut the data by sector. So let's spend a minute on this slide where we've introduced the segments both globally and in the US in terms of growth rates. I'm only going to touch on just a few of these sectors right now, and particularly focus on those who are going to hit an inflection point over the course of the next 5 years. Additionally, in most cases on this chart, you're going to see that the US and the global growth rates pretty much match each other numerically, but I do want to let you know that you need to bear in mind that that's sometimes the result of different drivers. So definitely need to dive into the data behind that. Starting at the top, and consistent with the themes that we touched upon just a few slides earlier, the highest growth segments in both the US and around the globe are internet advertising and internet access. Internet access will generate consumer spend greater than any other media product or service as we look around the globe. You'll also see, though, that in terms of the market leader, it actually flip-flops depending on whether you're talking about global or the US. This mostly has to do with the maturity of the US market as well as the significant uptake rates that we're seeing in mobile. Moving down the page, I'm going to focus next on filmed entertainment. Filmed entertainment revenue will surpass the $100 billion mark globally by 2017, driven mostly by emerging markets where we're seeing extensive growth. But it's also a testament to the resilience, there it goes, I got that out, also a testament to the resilience of the box office, where our consumers are absolutely continuing to enjoy the cinematic experience. That's coming even while we're seeing growth rates across OTT and broadcaster video on demand of over 20% across our forecast period. And not surprisingly, with growth rates of over 20%, we're expecting that electronic home video will surpass physical home video by the time we reach the end of the forecast period. Moving further down our chart to recorded music, we're expecting to see in the course of this next year that digital recorded music will surpass the revenue from physical recorded music. Additionally, acknowledging the 360 approach that this industry is now focused on, we've added additional data to the outlook this year. So this year we've included data around live music as well. Finally, at the bottom of the slide, the newspaper industry's revenue decline will finally come to an end in 2015. And additionally, magazine revenue will resume its growth, principally driven by growth in the developing countries, where the growing middle class are continuing to pick up these products individually as opposed to passing them along among groups. And that growth in the emerging companies is beginning to exceed the declines that we're experiencing in the mature markets on the physical side. One important point to note about the slide overall. In terms of digital advertising, we've grouped it all up in internet advertising to avoid double counting. But especially when I'm talking about newspaper and magazine, if we were to break the data back into its natural categories, you would see much less disparity between the US and the global growth rates that we have shown here. And that's because the digital advertising growth in the US is offsetting more of the physical declines as we're more mature in that life cycle. We do cut that data just that way if you were to dive into our outlook forecasts. I've only scratched the surface here in terms of our sectors. We're going to hear a lot more, as I mentioned, during our conversations today, but I also encourage you to grab your edition of the Hollywood Reporter, where on page 50, we already have our first spread of the data. I encourage you to pick that up and read that. And of course, any of our subject matter specialists would be happy at any time to dive much more deeply into any one of these sectors with you. Final slide in terms of our introduction. And this represents something that's very new for us in terms of this year's outlook, and we're very excited about. The 12 hot topics that you see around the circle, categorized within 5 overarching themes, represent the trends that we feel will be driving the industry outlook over the next 5-year projection period. This year's Insight piece, I'm going to grab my next prop. Our Outlook Insight. Again, we no longer print the whole book, but in the Insight, you're going to see much more in-depth discussion on each of these 12 topics. These also represent our themes for this morning and the remainder of the discussions that we're going to have. So throughout the conversations that are going to follow me, you'll hear discussion and perspective around mobile advertising, the potential for the connected consumer, and in particular the super fan, collaboration, innovation, and geographic market differences as it's impacting our industry. So with this brief introduction as a bit of a backdrop for the rest of the morning, let's get right into it. With that, I'm pleased to introduce my partner, Marcel Finez, who's our Global Entertainment and Media Leader for PwC, together with Matthew Garahan, the Media Editor for the Financial Times.